Welcome to Between Authors. I am your host, author Adrian Lopez. If you enjoy this episode, don't forget to hit like and leave us a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification so you don't miss all the amazing authors coming up. What is it that excites us as a reader? It's finding that author or book we have never seen before, may never have been heard of, sort of like the treasure hunt as a reader. My goal for this podcast is to bring to you authors and books that you may never have found that may have been the treasure you have been searching for all along. Today on episode 9 of Between Authors, I bring to you author Ericka Carmona Vega. We're going to go over what she's working on, what her plans are for the future, and some of the other things she's involved with. Welcome to the show, Ericka.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Really excited to be here.
Why don't you give the viewers a little bit of an introduction to you, who you are, what you're working on, what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. So I am an Indigenous artivist, I like to say. And the work that I do really is around bringing light to our Indigenous roots on Mexico Tenochca, and yielding empowerment and sharing that empowerment with other Indigenous folks, specifically youth. I am a YA writer, and I wrote my first novel, Rise the West Awakens, which we'll have an opportunity to further discuss. I'm originally from LA, and I trace my ancestral roots to central Mexico.
Why don't you give us a little bit of an idea of your influences? It could be other authors, it could be books, it could be anything in general, but just give us a little bit about what makes up what you enjoy and what you're working on.
It's so hard to choose. I have so many interests. However, I would say that the most foundational influences are those that are closest to my heart. Of course, the art of the Mexico Tenochca. I can't tell you how many times I would spend nights just thumbing through codexes and studying philosophy. So I am a student of philosophy, of world philosophies, and I find our indigenous philosophy to be incredibly fulfilling and insightful. And I love Toltec wisdom, and therefore I am a fan of Don Miguel Ruiz. And of course, as a person of my generation, I would say that Sandra Cisneros has also been an amazing influence, because it was through her work, House of Mango Street, where I first envisioned or saw that I too could be a writer.
That's great. So you mentioned your book, I believe, which is called Rise, the West Awakens. Why don't you discuss a little bit, give us an idea what the book is about, share as much or as little as you want to right now.
Rise the West Awakens is a coming of age story where we see two young women going through the process of navigating their community, their home life, and also the complexities of growing up Indigenous in LA. So we find that these empowered Indigenous young women end up leading social justice efforts, just because they have a calling and they have an instinct for it. However, there's more to it. We find that they're actually reawakened Aztec gods that are running through the streets of LA. So there's a magic, there's mythology, there's history, and hope, and I think that's the biggest takeaway that I hope that my readers will take from it. That they feel that they understand the trajectory of the Indigenous communities within LA, the complexities, the difficulties, but also the joy and hope that we have for our future.
That's great. I'm actually very interested to read it when it is available. I read some of the blurbs on there, and it sounds great. They really talked highly of it, so I am interested to read it when it's available. Let me ask you a couple of questions in terms of the book. Do you have a favorite scene that's in the book that you wrote, or maybe a favorite moment as you were writing it?
I think that the biggest joy for me in writing this work is that the I'm not a mother per se, but the children that I wrote about, they're very real for me. And so any scene in where they're being kids and they're being joyful and they're enjoying life, like I found myself laughing with them.
Hmm.
And similarly, when they were suffering, they were being harassed by the police or school officials, I cried with them too. So I think it was just that connection that I felt with them as I was writing these scenes that are based on historical facts. It's fiction, but the scenes are based on historical facts, and where I did a lot of research. I've spent the last 20 years researching and studying and really, really understanding the complexities of our community. So just being able to wrap all of that knowledge up into a scene in a way that really expresses my experience, through those fiction characters I created. That's really, really I would say an enjoyable and favorite part, and the scenes that came out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've discussed this or mentioned this on some previous episodes, but it's generally those moments that connect with your soul as a writer that you're reading, whether it's a personal experience or something you bring out. But those, again, are things that are just so genuine because of the connection that you had to the scene or to the characters, that the readers are absolutely going to feel that. They're going to feel that genuineness that's coming through your words because you felt that connection, right? You felt that connection to the characters and the scene. Um, I'm going to skip around here a little bit on the question because you didn't mention the research part. So why don't you discuss maybe what type of research you did or what you dug in a little heavier with to give you more of that background to the story?
And so the book is told in two storylines, one in 1967 and one in 1994. So it's a story of two girls that are growing up in different timelines. So we go back and forth. And so the gal who, Jade is her name, who is growing up and we're following in 1994, that's when I was growing up. So her character is based on things that I experienced myself. There's a walkout in protest of Proposition 187, and I was there. I saw it. I experienced it. So a lot of what comes across is firsthand experience plus research that I did around it. However, the timeline of 1967, I wasn't even born yet. So there was a lot of digging and analysis that I had to do. I do hold a bachelor's degree in history from Berkeley, where I studied a lot of these things, so I started my research very early on. However, the part of the exciting writing process is where you write something and then you want to validate it and verify it. And next thing you know, you've spent 5-6 hours, on this rabbit hole. And so that a lot of that happens as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you mentioned how some of this is through experiences, through some of the research you did, and you mentioned your favorite scene. Was there a scene that was the hardest for you? Now, it could be maybe it was hard to write, or you really had trouble explaining that part of the story, or maybe it was a difficult emotion or memory for you to bring up.
Yes, and so as I mentioned, during the walkout, in opposition for Proposition 187, I had to pull from a lot of memories from me being out in the streets of LA, where I was an indigenous dancer at the forefront of a lot of these walks and these protests. And oftentimes they were, we were, it was a peaceful march. But I would say that policing forces would overreact because we were kids at the end of the day. And next thing you know, you're running because the rubber bullets are coming your way, or there's tear gas, and it just creates chaos. And so having to relive some of that and write about it in a way that helps you understand what a young person, a person who is 14, 15 years old, could be feeling and experiencing. was challenging. So I had to really tap into some of those memories and the fear and the anger and the lack of understanding of why this was happening. And so that was very challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine on that side of it. The I know, like I said, I know your book is not published yet. You're working on that, but as you wrote this book and as you're going through the process, has it changed your writing process in general? How you approach a book, how you approach the storyline, how you write in general?
100%, 100%. So I had this vision, this dream to write this book when I was 19, and I want to age myself, but that's a long time ago. And I of course, when I had to live, I didn't feel prepared to write this story because it's not a one book story; it's a series. So when I first started writing this book, I was coming from an idea, like this. It was almost like a mission, or something I felt like I had to do. However, I had spent 20 years in the business world, and the first draft was written like a business report. Then she did this. It was very, it just wasn't.
Yeah,
And so I had to spend a lot of time finding my voice and finding the flow in which I wanted to tell the story. And also for me, what was really important is that I wasn't writing this work as a commercial product, but a manifestation, a song of solidarity. So I wanted to stick and be true to the indigenous storytelling techniques, that I grew up hearing and really embracing as part of my storytelling process. And so I had to develop my own voice in that way. And now that I have this final product that's being put out into the world, and I'm starting book 2 of Rise. I'm evaluating, the that first work, what I want to bring with me and what I want to enhance or change, going forward. One of the biggest challenges that I could tell you that indigenous people has is that we like to paint a story. So it's a slow burn, because we don't want to just jump in. We want to like paint you like it's just inviting you into a world. And so I was world building, and so my first novel tends to I would say that it has a slow start, but with the second novel I'm jumping right in. I'm just like there's magic, like someone's controlling wind and someone's controlling fire. And so I'm not gonna make it a slow burn because I already did that in book 1.
yeah. I mean, I've noticed that. I have a werewolf book that I'm writing that I'm in the editing process, and there is a book 2 for it. And I did notice that the first one you're kind of doing a lot of setup because you have to kind of explain why this is happening, everything. And book 2, you're like, okay, that's all out of the way. Let's just get into the best part of this. So I do understand that part of it. One of the things too that's very interesting that you mentioned is the writing style, right? How you went from trying to write it as a business, proposal or a business, recap or something, and then trying to find your voice. And I think again that's something very important for writers. And when I say young writers, I don't mean age, right? Because I'm up in age and I started writing my, professionally my stuff now. I've been writing since I was a kid. But when you're a newer writer, I think a lot of people forget the thing is you need to find your voice, right? Don't try to copy somebody else's style. Don't try to write it in a way that has, the words or the way it comes out that other people you enjoy. You need to find your voice, right? And that's kind of what you mentioned is that you wrote in your, wait a minute, this is not quite what I want to do. And you're able to find your voice. And that's, I think, the most important thing for writers is to understand you need to find your voice. And it may not happen the first book or 2. It may take you a couple tries to get there or many drafts in the process, but find your voice, find your style, your way of writing, how you want to explain stuff. So that was an excellent point that you brought up on that side of it.
Especially, I mean, I think broadly that's exactly right. However, when you're thinking about youth, youth, they catch on. They're just so smart and so connected, and you have to be very genuine, in the way that you speak to them. And one of the things that was really really important for me is that I never wanted to speak down to them. I wanted to just be like, like, these are really hard topics, and we're going to discuss these topics, but in a way that it's also joyful, it's balanced. And so so it was really important for me to stay true to my voice, stay true to what we were speaking about, but also remembering that if anyone knows how to have fun, it's young people. So there's so many different components that you need to keep in mind as you're
Yeah,
writing for your audience.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned, I believe you studied education as well in school, and that's I'd mentioned in the past that was something I thought about doing. I actually originally thought about being a math teacher, and I've always carried on the teaching aspect in all the jobs I've done. I'm the one that does, training classes or teaching or presentations and stuff, and it's always something, just like you said, you have to look at your audience and do it in a way where you're not just force feeding them, for them to understand, for them to enjoy it. Generally, if they don't enjoy it or don't really want to pay attention, they're not gonna remember anything, right? And that's always that balance of finding out, how do I get the message across, but at the same time keep the room or the audience interested in it. And sometimes it's very difficult. It's a hard balance to keep, but when you can find it's the perfect mix.
And so it's pedagogy, right? And so I studied pedagogy at UCLA. And some of the teachers that really influenced me was Freire, for instance. And he talked about like pedagogy of the oppressed, and how to talk about these things, because sometimes the oppressed don't really realize that they're being oppressed, and they don't understand. You're not going to show up and be like, you're being oppressed.
Yeah,
It's you have to, you show up in a way that it's going to speak to them. That speaks to your audience.
yeah, excellent point. You mentioned that you're writing book two. Is this something you planned on being a longer series? Are you letting the story kind of build itself as you go? Do you have any plans, in general for it?
Yes, 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 yes. I know. So I have an outline for 8 novels. However, I think a good stopping point for this novel could be four works, and then perhaps in the future, because it's historical fiction, and the way that the story advances and goes back and forth would touch more recent times, like 2016, when there was a lot of social unrest at the time. And so
Hmm.
I'm thinking that it would be a 4 book series for now. We'll see how it goes. And I have a lot of plans for it. And I've actually, one of the really, really neat and cool parts about writing a series is that you get to plant seeds now that won't really bloom until book 4. And if you're a
Yeah,
fan of the story, when you see that flower bloom in book 4, it's like, aha, so it's something that you've brewed over time. And so I am definitely thinking about all the different seeds that I'm planting right now that will bloom into the future.
yeah, that is a lot of fun. I did the same thing with my werewolf book, where as I was almost finished, I started thinking about book two, what it would be. And then I kind of went back and started, just like you said, you start planting the seeds that may not make a lot of sense really in that book one, but book two, you're going to go, oh, wait a minute, I remember that, and didn't quite understand the point of that, but now I understand exactly what that meant. And it's a ton of fun. That, and sometimes when you put Easter eggs in something that maybe very few would understand, but it is fun when they find it and they go, oh, I know exactly what that reference is. It's just a lot of fun when you do that for readers.
Well, one of the unique things about my novel Rise is that although it's for YA, it's very, very layered. And so I wanted to make sure that the work found you where you're at, So if you're interested in history, you'll find the history component. If you're interested in social justice, you'll find that. You're interested in mythology, but there's this component, this underlayer of spirituality that if you've already worked very much on your well-being, on your spirit, you'll find that as well. So that was also a lot of fun, adding layers upon layers for people to discover, so that if you read the book a second or third time, you'll find things that perhaps you didn't find the first time around.
Yeah, that sounds great. Um, besides the Rise series, right, or however many books that's going to be, is there anything else that you're planning on writing in the future? Stuff that you have wanted to do and have shelved it for the moment, or things you have started thinking about recently?
Yes, I'm super. Yeah, I'm a busy bee. So I have a lot of things cooking. Concurrently with Rice, I'm also writing a it's a philosophy that I'm sharing with an adult audience. So think of it in the vein of the Four Agreements, where it's a practical guide to spiritual liberation and the Four Agreements. So I'm writing a practical guide to identifying and finding your inner warrior, which essentially helps you find the leader within you. So there's going to be warrior types, and there's going to be characteristics associated with each one of those warrior types. There's going to be a quiz that tells you what kind of warrior you are and what you need to work on if you want to be a different type of warrior. And so this is meant to be a fun development tool for young people, but I think that it will also be very accessible for adults. I think the other way around. I think it's going to be for adults, accessible for young people.
Yeah, it sounds similar to some like the personality test. When you take in, it says this is where you lean, this is where your strengths are, your weaknesses are, and there's always a big market for that. That sounds very interesting. So I'm sure that will do well when it comes out.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about your academy, the Flor y Canta Academy. Why don't you give the viewers a little bit about what that is, why you started it, and what's involved with it?
In Xochimilcuicac means flower and song. So for the Mexico Tenochca, Floricanto is the philosophy of life. So when I decided to engage in this process, and everything, all my work is really linked, because what we find in Rise the Waste Awakens is that the youth leading the social justice efforts are invited to a Floricanto Academy to help them develop their leadership skills that will help them continue leading community efforts. And so I wanted to extend that into my business. I have a Floricanto Academy firm, and where I help my clients identify talent acquisition strategies that will help attract diverse talent. Because one of the biggest challenges that I saw in the corporate world is that it's sometimes very difficult for diverse talent to make it up in the ranks, to find opportunities, to be considered for these opportunities. And one of the things that was very devastating for me is that the more I grew in my human resources leadership development career, the less diverse people had access to me. So I was, in essence, like doing what the opposite of what I had hoped to do. I had hoped to go into the corporate world and train other diverse folks like me to take on leadership roles, but they no longer had access to me. So by having this firm and engaging with clients who are interested in inviting diverse talent and changing their strategies and the way in which they function, so that not only are they attracting the talent, but they have a welcoming environment, an inclusive environment for them, so that they can thrive within that environment and grow, is what I do now through Floricanto Academy. And of course, my plan is to continue growing that business, taking this work, the philosophy that I talked to you about, and creating workshops that I can offer to my clients, but also to schools, community colleges, and universities, and take the show on the road. So I have big plans for my books as well.
Yeah, that's actually very important and very needed. I mean, I come from the corporate world as well, and the problem with corporate world is it becomes very cookie cutter, right? They start looking for a very I don't want to say bland, but they start looking for very specific individuals or specific outline of what they want. And it's always the downfall of a corporation because they no longer look for those ones that can grow, that have the ability to grow, that have the ability to do more, right? And a lot of times, even when those individuals are say promoted or moved into the maybe the right situation, they're still usually held down by leadership, right? A lot of times the supervisors, the executives are scared to promote those talented, smart individuals because it's their weaknesses that get exposed. And you start getting just corporations from the top down where it's just not promoted, right? That individuality, that specialness, that intelligence, that willing to adapt, that willing to do stuff doesn't get promoted. Like you said, you started losing access to all those individuals, and it's cookie cutter. It's almost like clones walking through. Everybody's the same. They think the same. And if it's a big corporation, of course, it's going to keep moving. It's already established. It's going to do it. But it's those smaller ones that fall in that habit that are never going to grow for that reason. They no longer take the chance that the younger entrepreneur companies did, where they actually promoted you and actually encouraged that individuality, that intelligence, that taking a risk. So what you're doing is very important out there because the corporations don't do it themselves. They don't onboard properly anymore. They don't really teach. They don't mentor. They don't grow. So it's a very necessary process that you're offering that is needed out there.
There's got to be a paradigm shift, because I think what happens a lot of time is that we like to see what we know. So when you think about the manifestation of leadership skills, for instance, if you're a white man, you're going to consider how a good leader presents based on who they are, perhaps how they were raised. So a leader to them is going to look a specific way. This impacts how women show up as leaders, how diverse folks show up as leaders. And for me, as an indigenous individual, it was really incredibly challenging to fit into that mold, because I was raised to be a leader, but my leadership skills, first and foremost, start with empathy. And it starts with empathy and courage. And I didn't often find that empathy, and I was not going to strip myself of my humanity, because then going back to being genuine and showing up as your true self, I needed to be me, be fully me. And so the manifestation of leadership, the manifestation of how a leader shows up, will be unique and distinctive based on the person's worldview there. And it's an asset, because then you have different approaches. Like, leadership is not a cookie cutter, approach. You need a toolkit, because every individual is different. And so when you acknowledge that the leadership doesn't show up in just one way, but in a beautiful, diverse ways, you have the ability to really, really make impact and really touch lives. And so for me, that is incredibly important.
Yeah, I mean, empathy probably is the most important characteristic, and it's probably the one that you see the least out there almost all the time. It's something that's been either restricted or pushed down year after year, generation after generation, and it's just not there. And it's a shame, because there's so many talented individuals that have different backgrounds, have different ways they have learned or they have moved up, and they're just not thought of. They're not given the opportunity like they used to be, and it's basically hurting everyone. It's hurting the companies. They don't understand it. They won't understand it until it's a point where they're like, we have no talent in this corporation, and they'll just make an excuse and just try to work around it. But it is a shame. It is a shame that it's something that is slowly moved away from, and it's always great to see individuals like yourself or others that still hold that and understand how important that is. I mean, not only in business, but just every day in life, right? If you don't have empathy, you can't see anything from any other's point of view, right? Everybody's raised differently. And I'm not talking about, outlook. I'm talking about situations, right? How they grew up, where they grew up, what kind of struggles they've been in, and it's if you don't have empathy, you'll never see that. And if you're like, oh, they're different, they're never going to do it. It's a shame. It's a shame that it's come to that, so often now.
Well, Adrian, I am going to show up as the endless optimist that I am, because I do have some awesome clients who want that,
Yeah,
who are committed to bringing that to their organizations, and that's how I get invited, to collaborate and bring some of these ideas to the table. And so I do feel very blessed, to be seen and be heard, and to have the courage to speak to these things, because sometimes it's just easier to put your head down and be like everyone else and strip yourself of your humanity and lose your empathy, because that's what's going to get you promoted. But if you're not fulfilled, if you're not happy, if you're not being yourself, then like, what do you have? Like, you're not living your own life. And so I think for me, that's what's number one. And I feel very privileged to be able to do this work, with organizations that are committed to bringing some of these ideas, different ideas, because
yeah,
some organizations do acknowledge and recognize that people are not disposable, that people, if they leave you, that it's very difficult to find a good replacement, and they feel the pain, the team feels the pain, and they want to prevent that from happening. So they want to bring different ideas that hopefully engage and retain talent. And so that's where I'm at with Floricanto Academy.
yeah. Very, very proud of you for putting that out there and keeping that going. That's much needed out there.
Thank you.
And again, down below, I will leave the links for Ericka, for her website, the Academy, and a bunch of other stuff. We'll leave down below. Um, Besides your Academy, your business, the books and stuff, what else are you involved in or working on, or what's your future plans look like? The stuff that you would like to do.
So I think overall my life is full of art. You can see some of my art back here. I try to fill my life with art, because I feel like for the Mexico Tenochca, only art was real, and only art is divine. So it's like that's where you find the truth, like you find the truths of life. So I try to really, really immerse myself in art, in every form, music, visual. And so I stay very, very busy, just studying and learning and growing and evolving. Just recently I started playing chess, so I'm always up to different things. But generally speaking, I can tell you that writing these two works, I foresee myself dedicating and finishing these two works over the next 2 years. And so it's a big ambitious deadline, but I hope that within the next 2 years I finish the volume 2 of Rise, and this book on leadership philosophy. And so I am going to commit a lot of time to that. And beyond that, once I have the book on leadership philosophy, I will create my workshops and training program that I will continue offering to my clients and universities.
That sounds great. Again, it's very important. A lot of people don't understand is that you always are learning, right? You're always learning, you're always evolving, you're always growing. And when you don't realize that or don't accept that, again, you're limiting yourself, right? So the ones that do are humble enough to understand, I don't know it all. There's much more for me to learn. There's much more for me to grow into. And definitely you're always evolving. You're happy where you are right now. It's not where you should be, right? There's a lot of stuff for you to learn and go through. So it's a great mindset to keep yourself in. And I'm happy you're doing that.
Well, Adrian, what I always say is that as humans, we're growing and evolving and really expanding ourselves, because the opposite of that is dying. And we are too young, for that. We're on this planet for however long we are, and I think along the way, my spirit deserves to be explored, and it deserves to be expand as much as it needs to, as much as it wants to. So I am so hungry for knowledge. I am so curious, and one of the things, like, for the listeners out there, I think that the biggest takeaway for me in life is how curiosity just makes your life really, really exciting. You know, like when I hear that people are bored, I'm like, how? There's just so much to explore and discover. How can you be bored? You know, so
Yeah,
I like to stay curious and stay engaged with your personal involvement.
yeah, that's great. Um, I want to thank the viewers for watching. Again, please like the video and leave a comment for either Ericka or myself. If you have any questions or something you enjoyed about the episode, just let us know. We'll be happy to answer those. And again, I will leave all the links and stuff below for Ericka so you can find her website, her academy, and everything you want to follow up on. I really want to thank you for coming on, Ericka. This was a blast. Thank you for explaining more of what you do. And just want to say thank you for coming on. I really did appreciate this.
Thank you so much, Adrian. It's been a pleasure. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you again, viewers, for watching, and goodbye.